Good evening, my friends, and welcome back to the Unsheltered channel. My name is Rogan Freewolf, and you are watching The Good, the Bad, and the Bible. If this is your first time joining us, well, on this show, we talk about the good and the bad of the Bible. We don't fuck around. We take the Bible at face value, the good parts and the ugly parts, and we talk about it all. Specifically with the King James Version, because that's what I grew up on and am most familiar with. And I was raised to specifically only stick with the King James Version. Obviously, I'm not a believer in it anymore, otherwise, because, true believers say there's no such thing as bad. Like, bad and Bible, they don't go in the same sentence. There's no such thing as a bad Bible, but, watch my previous episodes of everything that I've been going through, because I've been going through the entire first 5 books of the Bible. It might be all I do, I don't know, but I'm going to at least finish with Deuteronomy. So I'm going to try to. And boy, the Bible really, really does speak for itself when you take it at face value. Which is really not hard to do, because the Bible lays out a lot of its own issues for itself. But it's not all bad. Not 100%. And in fact, we have, in our first bit today, I have 4 bits to share with you. Not stories, unfortunately. Well, not really. But some you could say somewhat stories, but some laws that are laid down. Some good, some, well, we'll get to them. But let's start at the beginning, because we're trying to do this in as chronological order as possible. And yes, we do smoke weed and occasionally drink on this channel. So, the very beginning, the daughters of Zelophehad. Let's be honest, no one gives a shit. But it's a very hard name to pronounce. But some daughters of this guy that died, who had no sons, comes to Moses and says, "Hey, Moses, our father died, had no sons to leave land to. What do we do?" Because back then, women were unfortunately treated as property. Might be a shock, but this is the Old Testament. This is going way back. And, the women, they were worried about their future investment in the Promised Land. Which is a pretty fair concern, because they would have nowhere to go when they got there. They're still in their wandering process. The whole time Moses is with them, they are not in the Promised Land. So they're like, "Hey, our dad died. He was one of the people that sinned, against Moses and rebelled against him and died. But, we were good. We were good. We didn't, obviously we didn't die, so we're fine. Can we get land? Because we have no brothers to inherit it." And Moses takes it before the Lord, and the Lord decides that, sure, why not? Let them have it. And then they even go on further to, like, they have like some additional ordeals to where the land will go if, the person dies and doesn't have any kids left, and and they don't have any close relatives, then who it passes on to, and so on and so on and so forth. So, point being of sharing this is that we have a plus here. We actually have an incident where the women get a break. Unfortunately, there can't be any men. There can't be any brothers for women to inherit land, because it seems like women aren't really allowed to inherit land. It's like they have to have no men in their lives, and it has to be passed down to them, which kind of sucks. But it's like, hey, well, at least here's a little positive loophole. So I guess we can count that as a positive in a very sexist society from back then. And it's also a religion that still gets practiced today. I don't know if it's exactly to this degree. Definitely not to this degree, but they have their own version now that's evolved. Still the same in many ways, but obviously not quite all. And then we take a little break from talking about the rules, and God decides to talk to Moses and say, oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to kill you because of that one time that you rebelled against me and hit that rock. You remember? That's literally what happens. God just takes a break from everything to remind Moses, I'm going to end you later for that thing you did. Now, you would think that with God saying this to Moses, that Moses' death is like right around the corner. But strangely enough, Moses doesn't die until the end of the next book. And the next book is like 34 chapters long. We still have about 10 more chapters in Numbers before the end of it. So we got like 10 more chapters there, 34 in all of Deuteronomy, and then Moses dies. Oh yeah, and I looked ahead to see what was going on in Deuteronomy, and maybe it was a little bit shorter period of time than what it would take to actually go through that entire book. But it seems like the entire book just consists of Moses giving a history lesson to the Israelites of all the shit they've already been through, which is kind of weird and makes me debate going through it, but I'm kind of curious because he rehashes a lot of stuff, so I'm curious, why not? It's the last of the 5 holy original books of the Bible that everything is based off of, supposedly. Christians think Christianity is somehow based off of it, but well, we've had that discussion here before. And I have other videos on the actual origin of Christianity. So you can go watch those and listen to that and check those sources out and such. But yes, Moses is not about to die. And God just puts everything on hold for a second. It's like, hey, and this is interesting the way he says it too. He didn't say it the way I just said it. This is the way God puts it. He says, the Lord says unto Moses, get thee up into this Mount Abarim. Sorry, my dyslexia kind of screwed me on that one. I thought it was Mount Abraham or Abram, but it's Abarim. And see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And when thou hast seen it, thou also shalt be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron, thy brother, was gathered. Gathered unto thy people, that doesn't mean having a powwow with the children of Israel. No, that's gathered unto thy people. That is in reference to the way Aaron died. Aaron went up into a mountain. He was the previous high priest. For some reason, he deserved, or God decided that he deserved to die much sooner than Moses. Even though Moses did all the rebelling in that whole issue. Like, it doesn't even say what Aaron did. It's weird. It's a weird story. It makes no sense. But God is just basically telling him, yeah, so when it's time, you're going to go up into this mountain, and you will be, to put it in more modern words, you will be gathered to your ancestors the way Aaron was gathered to his ancestors. It was like if a mafia boss told you, yeah, you're going to have a reunion, you're going to have a family reunion with all your dead relatives because of that one time that you crossed me. You shouldn't have crossed me, Mickey Moses. You shouldn't have crossed me. Oh, but here's a bunch more rules that I want you to remind everyone of before I finish you off. And then God literally just jumps right back into talking about sacrifices again. Oh, yeah. And I noticed something kind of like curious about these sacrifices. So let's take a look at that. So I am reading through these boring ass feasts because God just loves to go into detail about feasts and all kinds of other shit. He loves having all kinds of sacrifices. We know that. If you've been following this series, you know from previous episodes where God just goes on and on about blood, but also other kinds of details and shit. But this time, he's getting back to, sacrifices. And this time around, he's got a whole combination that he wants done at one time. And, it's nothing too outrageous at first. All at one time, let's see. There are ones here and there. One lamb, at one in the morning, one lamb in the evening. Okay, that's nothing too crazy, right? Might happen multiple times a week. It gets nuts. There's some flour, there's some oil. It's more than just meat that's getting burned. But then, and it sounds, it's like a here and there sort of thing in a season, kind of a scheduled thing. But then God comes to these particularly scheduled events where he's like, all right, and then during this time of year, I want this type of sacrifice. And he starts going wild. For an example, 2 young bullocks. I'm guessing that's like male bulls. 1 ram, 7 lambs. And then 1 goat. That's all for one. And then he says, you'll offer these besides the burnt offering in the morning. Wait, where is it? Yep. Which is for a continual burnt offering, and this manner ye shall offer daily throughout the 7 days. So in a whole week of sacrificing, that specific combo. And I did the math on it. 88. So for this particular event, there is 88 animals being slaughtered. Mostly lambs. Interesting how Yahweh has such a thing for lambs. Huh. And specifically young bullocks. I only noticed that till now. Oh yeah, it's young bullocks the other times too. Wow. So if you think 88 is a lot to be sacrificed to a god for one time a year, think again, because the very next feasts, or I should say the next collection of feasts, this one lasts for like, I didn't even want to do the math, to be honest, but this is a long feast. Multiple days and multiple slaughters every single day, and it switches up here and there. But for this entire event, this is in chapter 29, by the way. The one with the 88 sacrifices, that was at the end of the chapter right before it, chapter 28. This one in chapter 29, the entire chapter is this multi-day feast that happens. And it is literally almost the exact same combo as mentioned before in the last chapter. Usually multiple young bullocks. Oh yeah, instead of 7 lambs, it's 14. Oh yeah, and 2 rams. We upped that. And 1 kid of the goats. So a little bit more than the other one. Some of them doubled. And it doesn't stay entirely consistent. But I did the math on those again. And then for that entire book, for that entire chapter, of all the animals total that God wants slaughtered in sacrifice to him, 219. 133 of which are lambs. So it's a lot. That's a lot. Oh yeah, and just for the fun shits and giggles of it, at the very end, he lists the different types of other offerings that he likes. We've talked about them previously a little bit here and there, but this is a nice little summary of them. He said, in regards to the whole feast that was, of all these feasts that were going on these different days and with all these sacrifices and stuff. Because it's not all, it's not all feasting, but there's just, it seems like a lot of pointless slaughter. All to celebrate him. But he says, these things ye shall do unto the Lord in your set feasts, beside your vows, and your obligatory offering, your free will offerings, for your burnt offerings, and for your meat offerings, and for your drink offerings, and for your peace offerings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Yeah, that's 5. That's 5 different types of offerings right there. And that's not including sin offerings. 6. And then all these other ones for the feasts that God requires to happen. Like, that, I feel like that's got to be kind of rough on the economy. Like, can everyone afford all this? In addition to all their other regular peace offerings? And I mean, and these are all like really good quality animals that God wants. I mean, obviously he doesn't want the shit animals. He doesn't want the ones that are sick and dying. Which is like, I get that, but if you were that nice of a God, you would, I mean, nature is nice enough like that to where even like predators, when they hunt for the sick. They hunt for the weak. They hunt for the most exposed, the ones that are easiest. They stay away from the strongest and the healthiest and the best. Like, why can't this God mimic the nature that he set up? It would make more sense if he just asked for those instead. But no, he wants the best of everything. He's a jealous, greedy fucker. To be honest. That's how he keeps coming across. And then to end on such a lovely note, because we got to balance out any positivity for the women in the beginning. I'm saying this with sarcasm, by the way. We got to balance out the positivity that we've been giving towards women in the Old Testament for the beginning of this with some negativity. So bringing back the sexism in full force, thanks to your friendly, tyrannical neighborhood Yahweh, the dragon, according to some descriptions, Bible-based. Moses gets into talking about making vows, and I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of this shit that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there's enough here for us to understand the level of control that is desired here. And it's kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of, shall we say, controversial. But Moses is sharing with the Israelites, and this rule that he's giving is, he's talking about vows, and he's talking about how if someone makes a vow, they're not allowed to break it, with God and everything like that. And of course he's talking about men at first, and then he gets to talking about women. It's very interesting how women are treated with being allowed to make vows or promises. And he says, verse 3, chapter 30, if a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord, and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, so she lives at home with her parents, and she makes this promise before God or whatever, and says, and if her father hears the vow, and her bond wherewith she hath bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, every bond wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand. So, if the father allows and is cool with his daughter making this vow of whatever it could be, I don't understand why it would be. It'd be nice if they had like an example. But maybe it's like, maybe she vows to be celibate for a certain amount of time, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm cool with that. You can stay away from boys all you want. That makes me completely fine. I imagine that might be one example, possibly. I don't know. But then it turns around and says, but if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth Not any of her vows or of her bonds wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her because her father disallowed her. So, and to a certain degree, it makes sense because, if she's too young to where, like, if she, like, maybe she, like, makes a promise to, like, marry someone with, like, a specific boyfriend, and she's only, like, a little kid, but she makes a promise or whatever, and the dad's like, "Oh, you're too young for that. You wait till you're older, okay?" Something like that. That would make sense. I mean, it seems pretty simple and straightforward for a young kid or, a teenager or whatever. Could be the same ordeal. But, I mean, it could also go kind of the opposite way because, what if she wants to be celibate or she wants to, she just doesn't want to marry anyone for a while, but the dad wants to marry her off to someone, and he's like, "Oh, no, sorry, you can't keep your promise, your spiritual promise to God that you want to keep and stay celibate. You have to marry so and so," because that is how they did it back then, and in some places still now, sadly. Oh, but then the rule doesn't just apply to her dad, it also applies to whoever she ends up marrying. A guy, obviously, because they don't believe in gay marriage and all that shit. So if she wants to experiment and see if, not having sex for a while is good for the body or something, because that was a thing back then, and some people say it's a thing now. So if she wanted to experiment and try that out, and the husband was like, no, you cannot make that vow and do that because I need to be satisfied, I am the man. In this situation, according to these rules, God's like, that's fine, she doesn't have to keep that vow. So, yeah, there's just like another cutoff point for women having free will in the Old Testament. They're not even allowed to make promises or vows if the man of their house does not approve of it. That's just what's there. In verse 6, it's if she had it all in husband when she vowed or uttered aught out of her lips wherewith she bound her soul. Oh yeah, then it goes into all that. Yep. Every vow and every binding oath, verse 13. To afflict the soul, her husband may establish it, or her husband may make it void. It is all up to the husband. There is no say for her. The only freedom she has is basically not being married to anyone, and as well as not living at home with her father. That is wow, that sucks. Damn. And that is why some people do not believe in the Bible. Because it is a bit sexist as fuck. Yeah. So that is it for today. And be sure to join us next time for God commanding another round of genocide. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, leave a like. Share if you want to. Of course, you don't have to at all. But yeah, tune in next time. I'm sorry, I've been tired. I've been going through a lot. I know, I've been like squinty-eyed and looking tired this entire video. And soon I shall be passed out. But you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And stay safe until next time, my friends. Farewell.